Should you buy a brand new Subaru BRZ or a used Porsche? Let's find out. Jared here with CarBuzz.com, and I'm going to pitch you a scenario. You're in the market for a sports car. It's going to be your weekend toy or maybe even your daily driver. Do you spend it on a brand new car, or do you see what's available on the used market? To answer this question, I've stacked up two cars that are more similar than you might think. Over here in red is the 2022 second generation Subaru BRZ with a ton of improvements over the previous generation model. And here in blue is a 2001 Porsche Boxster, but not just any Porsche Boxster, this is my personal car. In this video, we're going to talk about how each of these cars drive, go over some of the more practical considerations that you might need to worry about, and at the end, we're going to decide which one is best for you. So we're going to start this video by talking about an important topic with sports cars, and that is performance. Now, despite being 20 years apart, these two cars are more similar than you might think. Let's begin with the Boxster. It has a 2.7 liter flat six engine developing 217 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque. Now, that's not a lot by modern Porsche standards, but it was quick at the time, could get you from 0 to 60 in about 6.4 seconds if you bought the manual transmission, all of that power going out to the rear wheels only. Now, that might not be enough power to pin you back in your seat, but if you rev it out just a little bit to that 7,200 RPM red line, that flat six engine can still make your ears quiver in delight. The BRZ has a smaller engine, just 2.4 liters compared to 2.7, and it's only a 4-cylinder compared to the Boxster's 6-cylinder. Despite that, it actually has more horsepower. That's what 20 years of engineering is going to do. Subaru increased the displacement of its Boxster 4 engine in the second generation BRZ to 2.4 liters. It used to be a 2-liter engine, and with the increase of displacement, we get significantly more power. It now produces 228 horsepower, which is more than my Boxster, but only 182 pound-feet of torque, which is actually a little bit less than the Porsche. That being said, it is significantly more than the last generation BRZ, which only produced about 150 pound-feet of torque. Now, the old BRZ had a really big problem where in the mid-range of the RPM, it was basically gutless. It had no torque. The torque just dipped off completely. But with this new generation model, when you put your foot down, you feel that you have a lot more punchiness in that mid-range. This is a huge improvement over the previous generation BRZ in terms of performance. If you nail the start off the line, you should be able to do a 0 to 60 run in about 5.9 seconds in the BRZ, which is really quick given how much power it has. This is a very light vehicle as well. But that 5.9 seconds is only going to come if you get the 6-speed manual, and unfortunately, Subaru felt fit to send me a BRZ with the optional 6-speed automatic. Not only does this transmission add about $1,800 to the price, but it is going to slow the BRZ down quite significantly. You'll only hit 60 miles an hour in about 6.6 seconds with this transmission, making it just a little bit slower than the Boxster. Sage advice from me: get the manual. There is one major advantage though to getting the automatic transmission in this car for $1,800, and that is the Subaru EyeSight. It's the safety suite in this car. You've got these two cameras right up here on the dash. They're going to give you things like automatic emergency braking, adaptive cruise control. You do not get those if you get the manual. Honestly, this is a sports car. I would easily sacrifice those things in the name of fun. As for the Boxster, you could get it with one of two different transmission options if you got the base model, not the Boxster S. You could get a 5-speed manual, which is what I have, or you could get a 5-speed Tiptronic automatic. Now, I've never driven the automatic version of this car, but I can tell you that a 20-year-old slush box is not going to hold a candle to the automatic that's in the Subaru BRZ. You really want to get the Boxster with the 5-speed manual, but even if you do, the transmission is not this car's strong point. Now, the Boxster S got a more robust 6-speed manual transmission that I've heard great things about, but this 5-speed manual was just a little bit sloppy, at least from the factory. So when I got my car, I actually purchased a shifter kit for it. You can buy one straight from Porsche. It's an OEM part that comes out of the 997 generation 911, so it bolts right up to the Boxster with nothing complicated. $250, which I don't think is a lot to spend on something like that, and it only takes about an hour and a half to install. Fixes the notchiness issue. The transmission feels a lot better to row through the gears now. It fixes the slop by quite a lot, but even still, that 6-speed manual that you can get in the BRZ is just so great that the shifter in my Boxster really isn't even comparable. I would put the BRZ's manual right up there with the best of a brand new Porsche. It's that good. So in terms of overall performance, the Boxster does come close, but it's gotta be point Subaru here. It's amazing how far technology has come in the modern era, that even with 2 fewer cylinders and less displacement, the BRZ is quicker than my 20-year-old Porsche. Now you could get around that fact by opting for a slightly newer Porsche or getting a Boxster S, in which case the performance in the Porsche would outmatch the Subaru. Now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty of how these cars drive. And this is an area where you might expect that the Porsche has a huge advantage over the Subaru. I really love this car. That's why I bought it, of course. The steering is super sharp, especially when you get it off center. It's a little bit dead right in the middle, but once you load it up, you really start to feel exactly what the front end is up to. This car is so neutral and balanced thanks to the mid-engine design. It's nearly a 50-50 weight distribution. Nothing about this driving experience feels like it's 2 decades old, except for maybe the brakes. Those definitely don't stop the car in a hurry. Those feel like they're 20 years old. Now you can improve the performance, obviously, if you're willing to go on the aftermarket. I could get some stiffer springs for this car, I could get some better brakes, and that would all bring it closer to the modern realm of performance, but I'm kind of a purist, so I'm leaving my Boxster mostly stock. And I do love having a convertible. This is one of my favorite parts about owning the Boxster, and it's something that I wish Subaru would have done with the BRZ, is offer a sunroof or some kind of open roof option, because especially where I live in Florida, driving with the roof down is a very special experience. You've got the wind in your hair, you've got a bit more drama, and you can just hear the induction from that flat 6 engine, all the better. Oh, I love driving this car with the top down. You might be sitting there thinking that there is no way that a humble Subaru could possibly drive as well as a Porsche, but this BRZ and its twin sibling, the Toyota GR86, are among the best driving experiences that you can get at any price level. The steering here is lighter than the Porsche, but you lose absolutely nothing in communication. If anything, the BRZ is sharper on center than my Porsche, and I can feel exactly what the front end is doing. I have so much direct communication. I really feel in sync, like me and the BRZ are just one being. And despite not having the engine in the middle like the Porsche, it's the BRZ that actually gets closer to that perfect Goldilocks 50-50 weight distribution. And I think that's part of the reason why this car feels so well balanced. That and just one of the most well-engineered chassis of any modern sports car. If you're looking for like your first ever sports car, I really can't think of anything better than this. The Mazda Miata is a ton of fun because it's convertible, but what Subaru has done here is basically package a 6-figure driving experience into a car that you can purchase for under 30 grand. So as with the actual performance specs, if you want to talk about which one is the better driver, I'm gonna give it to the Subaru. So now let's talk about interiors. Even though you buy a sports car for how it drives, this is where you're gonna spend all of your time, so it's still important that it has a nice, well-finished cabin. Now let's start here in the BRZ because it clearly has the edge in modernity. Every single BRZ is going to ship with this 8-inch touchscreen display here. You get Bluetooth, you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and crucially, every new car sold today has to have a backup camera. The Porsche is much more simple and less modern here in the dashboard. We've got a double-din radio with some basic preset buttons for your radio. There are a lot of them, which is nice. We do have a CD player underneath here, but it no longer works, which is why the previous owner wired in this aux jack, which I'm very thankful to have. Porsche did offer a built-in navigation system on the Boxster, but it is woefully out of date by modern standards. If you wanted the dashboard to be a little bit more modern in here, Porsche sells a head unit that looks virtually OEM and adds Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it is very pricey at $1,500. In terms of gauges, Porsche keeps things equally simple. I love these 3 analog dials with the tachometer in the middle, just where it's supposed to be. And just like the gauges, we have a simple 3-spoke steering wheel, no buttons, no complications. The Subaru has a 7-inch digital cluster, a lot more techy, still has the tachometer right there in the middle, which I think is quite cool. You can see it's this circular design now, but if I push the track button down on the dash, I can actually switch it to this linear display where I can have the higher RPMs more prominent. That is great when you're driving on a track. So although this does have modern controls like audio over here, it's not distracting whatsoever. I do wish these paddle shifters weren't here, but the steering wheel itself is very nice, falls neatly into hand. Good job, Subaru. Now, overall, there's nothing fancy about the BRZ's interior, but it's amazing how far 20 years has separated the interiors so that this humble Subaru actually feels a little bit nicer to sit in than my Boxster. Now, I don't have leather seats here, and they're not powered or memory like they are in the Boxster. I still have to manually adjust them. The seats themselves are way more comfortable. The seating position in here is better, the bolstering is better, and since we have the BRZ Premium, these seats are heated and have this nice suede material on them. So in terms of the interior, the BRZ gets the clear win yet again. Now let's get on to the subject of practicality. It might not be the most important thing to consider when purchasing a sports car, but if you're going to use this car every day, it might be important. Let's start with the BRZ. Because the engine is up front, we have a normal trunk right here with 6.3 cubic feet of storage. It's not huge, the opening is not that big, but you can get a medium-sized suitcase in here just fine. Now the Boxster has less space in the back because there is an engine sitting under here. The storage space in here is a bit shallow at 4.4 cubic feet. But since the engine is back here, we have a second trunk up here in the front. Now this one is a little bit larger than the one in the back with 5.3 cubic feet of space. So if you add the two together, the Boxster has a little bit more practicality than the Subaru does. Now I can fit a medium-sized roller bag in here, but my largest suitcase simply won't fit. It has to ride inelegantly on the passenger seat. Now the BRZ may not have 2 trunks, but it does have a back seat. Well, sort of, kind of. As you can see, I don't really fit back here, but if you have some small children, maybe they can ride back here on the way to school. Unfortunately, the way that you get into these back seats is a bit annoying. You tilt the seat forward, and unfortunately, when you go ahead and pull it back, it does not go back to the original seating position that you had before, so you will have to adjust it. Honestly, although I wouldn't use these as actual back seats, you can fold this down into the trunk, and you can fit an entire set of track tires back here. And the practicality doesn't stop back there. This may only be a 4-seat car, but we actually have 5 total cup holders. I have one right here, and then if I open up this center console here, I have 2 more here that you can kind of share between the front and the back seats. I've got 1 cup holder on each of the doors right here, so you really can put a ton of drinks in here. And unlike the Boxster, we do have a glove box here on the Subaru. For a 20-year-old car, the Boxster's practicality is not terrible on the inside. The early Boxsters did not have a glove box, but there's tons of other little storage nooks elsewhere. We've got this little ashtray-ish area, perfect for like jewelry or something like that. We have this rather large storage area right here behind in between the 2 seats. Here on the doors, I have rather large cubby areas that can fit a lot. You can get a lot in each of those. And then behind the seats, we have little pockets that are stitched into the seat. And I do have this storage area here on the bulkhead that you could maybe put a road map in, although nobody uses road maps anymore. As for the cup holders on this car, they are one of this vehicle's worst features. They're right here above the radio. You can push them out like so. And as you can see, they're not very big. Your water will drip down on your electronics, which is obviously not good. And if you take a corner, your drink will fall right out. That is why I leave them retracted almost all the time. I don't use them. Instead, I got these ultimate cup holders. They're an aftermarket. One guy makes them, and these hold my drinks much better without me worrying about spilling. So the Subaru has that back seat and better cup holders, but the Boxster does have 2 very usable trunks. Really not sure which one of these is better. It kind of depends on what you're going to use the car for. So for the first time in this video, I'm going to say that for practicality, it's a draw. The next thing we're going to discuss is desirability. Now this is completely subjective, but I'm going to talk about some of the pros and cons about owning a Subaru BRZ versus a 20-year-old Porsche. Let's face it, a Subaru, even a really nice one like this BRZ, just isn't as premium as something built by Porsche. That being said, I think the 2022 BRZ looks great. It has a lot of curb appeal, especially this premium trim that Subaru sent me. I love the LED headlights that you get on the premium trim, these larger 18-inch wheels with Michelin Pilot Sport rubber, and here at the back, I love this sort of ducktail spoiler. Gives the BRZ a nice aggressive look. Overall though, I'd say this is a very youthful car, not necessarily a car that screams, I have a lot of money. Obviously, I'm a bit biased on the Porsche because I bought one, but I think this is a great looking car. Now, obviously, I'm a bit biased when it comes to the Porsche because I bought this car, but I think it looks seriously great. The headlights are interesting. They're obviously out of date because they don't have LED technology like the Subaru. And when this car first came out, people were actually so mad at these headlights because they weren't Porsche's traditional circular units that they called them the fried eggs. Fast forward to today and people actually like the fried eggs because they are so different from anything else Porsche has ever made. I do love this car's mid-engine proportions. It looks basically like a baby supercar, and in terms of curb appeal, I think you'd get a lot more looks driving around in the Porsche with the top down than you would in the BRZ. So although the BRZ is a rather attractive sports car, you cannot beat that gooey feeling that comes in your heart when you own a Porsche, which is why I'm giving the desirability category to the Boxster. Time to wrap up with pricing because that's obviously important when deciding whether to buy a brand new sports car or a used one, and we're going to begin with the Subaru because it's a lot simpler to explain. The base price of a 2022 BRZ is just under $28,000 plus a $960 destination fee, so it is quite affordable by new sports car standards. If you want the premium model, which is what we have here, that's going to cost you around $30,500, and if for some reason you want to get that $1,800 automatic plus the premium trim, that's going to put you at around 33 grand. Now onto the Boxster, which requires a little bit of a longer conversation. When this car was new, back in 2001, it had an MSRP of $42,000. That was just the base price. My car was actually closer to $57,000, which is a lot more than what you'll pay for the BRZ, even before you factor in inflation. Now, obviously my car is 20 years old, so I paid a lot less for it. My car had about 48,000 miles on it, two-owner car with a full service history, so I paid about $14,000 for mine. The prices are still going up on these. I believe my car's worth maybe $17,000 or $18,000 since I purchased it, but you can potentially spend less than that if you're willing to take one in worse condition with a few more problems and more miles. Now, you can also spend more than that, maybe even upwards of $25,000 if you want a cream puff, or if you want the Boxster S, which comes with a larger motor producing 250 horsepower. I say if you can find a really nice Boxster S, it's certainly worth the upgrade. So at $14,000 for my Boxster, I spent roughly half of what it would cost to get a brand new base BRZ. But if you were willing to throw a little bit more money into the mix on the used market, you could get some seriously good Porsches. You could get the 987 generation Boxster, or the car that's more comparable to the BRZ, the Cayman, which is a fixed roof rather than a convertible. Or if you really want to go big, you could probably get a 996 generation Porsche 911 Carrera for about $30,000, about the same price as you'll pay for a BRZ Limited. So while my Boxster is really on par with the Subaru in terms of performance, if you're willing to spend the same amount on the BRZ on a used Porsche, you can get cars, the Cayman and the 911, that are quicker than any BRZ is going to be unless you modify it. So although it sounds amazing that you can get a used Porsche for half the price of a brand new BRZ, you have to factor in that the purchase price is not the only thing you have to worry about with the Porsche. See, here on the Subaru, you have a 3-year, 36,000 mile limited warranty plus a 5-year, 60,000 mile powertrain warranty. On the Porsche, you're on the hook for everything. And there are a lot of things. Right here in the trunk, I have the service history, the full service history from when this car was new, handed to me by the previous owner who knew the original owner. So I have every record for this car since it was new. Let me just open to a random page here. Okay, I see we have a mass airflow sensor. That was an $1,800 job right there. I have not owned this car for very long, but I have already added my own piece of paper to this folder right here. I was working on the car and I didn't drive it for like a little bit and it would not start. That required a new battery and a new alternator. Total cost about $1,000 right there. So I've definitely added to this service history since I've had the car. So as you can see, owning a used Porsche comes with a little bit of headaches, but I wanted to talk about what it might be like to own the Subaru. So I compared the alternator problem. Let's just say you open up the hood, this car won't start, and you need to do an alternator here on the BRZ. If you buy that Bosch component from Subaru, it'll run you about $580. And since this car will likely be covered under warranty, you won't pay anything in labor fees, but it is worth noting that a Subaru dealership will charge you a lot less per labor hour than Porsche will. So if you did have to pay out of pocket for the alternator here, it would be $580. Now, admittedly, I paid a little less than that for the alternator on my Porsche, just $480. But that's because the independent shop that I went to, which charges a little bit lower labor rates, said that they could buy the component directly from Bosch rather than Porsche. If you bought the part from Porsche, they'd be charging you a whopping $1,600. So in the long run, the Subaru BRZ should be a lot less expensive to own, and you likely won't have to build up a fat stack of receipts. So if you're looking for a sports car ownership experience that's hassle-free, the BRZ is the obvious choice here. So here's my final verdict. If you're looking for a sports car that's reliable, fun to drive, that you can also use every day, it's tough to beat the 2022 BRZ. I think it's fantastic, and if you're looking at this car or a used Porsche, I think the Subaru is the right choice.